I want to tell you about one specific trick, just one, that did more for my family's grocery budget over a single year than every other change I've made combined, more than any list of habits could really claim on its own. It's not a system. It's not 15 habits stacked carefully on top of each other, each one requiring its own explanation and its own adjustment period. It's a single, almost embarrassingly simple thing my grandmother did at the grocery store every single week of her adult life, without ever once treating it as remarkable, and once I actually understood why it worked as well as it did, I couldn't quite believe I'd spent decades doing the exact opposite without ever once stopping to question it. She paid for groceries in cash. Not sometimes, not when she happened to have it on her. Every single trip, cash only, counted out at the register from an envelope she'd filled at the start of the week with a fixed amount and nothing more. No card ever came out of her purse at a grocery store, not once, not even for something small. I used to think this was just an old habit from a time before cards existed the way they do now, a relic of an earlier decade rather than something worth actually copying today. That's what I assumed for years, until I sat down and thought honestly about what a card at checkout actually does to a person's brain in that exact moment, and what cash does differently. When you hand over a card, the transaction is abstract. The number on the screen goes up, you tap or swipe, and the money leaves your account somewhere else, invisibly, later. There's no physical sensation of loss attached to the moment itself. Your hand doesn't get lighter. Your wallet doesn't get thinner. The purchase happens, and your brain barely registers it as a real event at all, especially if you're doing it for the 40th time that month. Cash works completely differently, and this is the part I truly didn't understand until I actually tried it myself for a full month, rather than just reading about it and nodding along. When you're handing over physical bills, watching the stack in your hand actually shrink with every single item that gets rung up at the register, your brain registers it as a real loss, happening in real time, the same primitive part of your brain that reacts to actually losing something tangible right in front of you. A card triggers almost nothing by comparison. A quick tap, a beep, a receipt you'll glance at once and likely forget by the time you've loaded the car. Watching an envelope go from thick to noticeably thin over the course of a single grocery run does something a card simply cannot replicate, no matter how detailed the spending app on your phone claims to be. It makes you feel the actual cost, not just observe a number printed somewhere you'll check later, if you check it at all. So I tried it myself, filling an envelope at the start of each week with exactly what I'd normally expect to spend on groceries, and leaving every card at home, truly at home, not just zipped into a different pocket of my purse where I could still reach it if I got desperate halfway through the store. The first trip was uncomfortable in a way I wasn't prepared for. I stood in the cereal aisle actually doing math in my head, watching the envelope, calculating whether a slightly more expensive brand was really worth it against what I had left for the rest of the cart. I hadn't done that kind of real-time calculation at a grocery store in years, maybe ever. Not since cards became the automatic, thoughtless default for absolutely everything. By the third week, something had truly shifted, in a way that surprised me more than I expected it would. I was buying less impulsively, putting things back on the shelf that I'd normally have tossed into the cart without a second thought, not because I was deliberately depriving myself of anything I actually wanted, but because I could physically feel, right there in my hand, exactly how much closer each additional item brought me to the bottom of that envelope. There was no hiding from it, no vague sense that I'd figure it out later, the way a card so easily lets you do, quietly deferring the actual reckoning to some point in the future that never quite arrives with the same clarity. The number wasn't abstract anymore, tucked away in an app I might check once a week if I remembered. It was sitting right there in my palm, visibly, undeniably getting smaller with every aisle. By the end of the first full month, I'd spent noticeably less than my usual grocery total, without a single moment of feeling truly restricted or deprived, while I was actually standing in the store making decisions. I wasn't buying worse food, and I wasn't skipping things my family actually needed. I was simply buying more deliberately, the way my grandmother apparently had for her entire adult life, without ever once thinking of it as some kind of discipline or willpower exercise worth mentioning to anyone. To her, it was just how you paid for groceries, full stop. It never once occurred to her that there was another way to do it that might feel a little easier and faster in the moment, but would quietly, invisibly cost more by the time the month actually ended. I'll be honest with you about the part that surprised me most. I expected the hard part to be the math, standing there calculating whether I could afford something. The actual hard part was retraining my hand to reach for an envelope instead of a card, a habit so deeply automatic after years of tapping and swiping that the first few trips felt almost clumsy, fumbling with bills at a register while someone behind me waited. That discomfort faded faster than I expected. Within a few weeks, it felt completely normal again, the way it must have felt to my grandmother her entire life, never once feeling like a burden because it was simply the only way she'd ever known. If you try this yourself, and I'd truly encourage you to, at least for 1 month before deciding whether it's for you, here's the one thing I'd tell you before you start. Don't just switch to cash and keep the same loose spending mindset you had before. Actually watch the envelope. Actually let yourself feel it getting thinner as you walk down each aisle. That physical awareness is the entire mechanism doing the work here, not the cash itself. A card in a drawer at home does nothing on its own. It's the feeling of the envelope in your hand, growing lighter with every single item, that quietly changes how you shop without you ever having to consciously decide to spend less. I still use cards for plenty of things, and I want to be clear that this isn't about abandoning modern convenience entirely across every part of your life. I don't think my grandmother would have judged anyone for using one either, given the actual choice, since she never had the option in the first place and simply worked with what was available to her at the time. But for groceries specifically, the one category where small, thoughtless purchases add up fastest without anyone ever noticing until the total flashes on the screen at checkout, cash has stayed permanently in my own routine since that first month, because nothing else I've tried since has ever made the actual cost of a decision feel quite so immediate or quite so real in the exact moment it actually matters most, standing there in the aisle with a choice still to make. If you decide to try this yourself, even just for a single month before deciding whether it's actually worth keeping, I'd say the same thing to you that I had to keep reminding myself in that first uncomfortable week. It isn't about the cash itself, not really. Plenty of people carry cash without it changing a single thing about how they spend it. It's about actually paying attention to the envelope as it empties, letting yourself notice, consciously, every single time it gets a little lighter. That small, repeated moment of noticing is doing nearly all of the real work here, far more than the paper money itself ever could on its own.